Welcome to the Brett Davis Podcast.
Well, good evening. We have a 3 for 3 tonight. This is going to be a great podcast, and we have this amazing film festival that's going to be showing some documentaries that are very important, which to me, I love the ocean and things that are going on in the ocean. And I have one of the leading experts, actually two of the leading experts. I know for a fact this gentleman is, because he's the go-to guy in San Diego. He knows everything that's going on with the ocean. And I'm not joking about that. It may sound like I'm joking, but seriously, he knows. He is the guy. So we're lucky to have, to me, you're still mayor. Mayor Serge. You probably get called mayor all the time still.
Oh, well, people want me to solve their problems, and I give them the contact information for the current mayor of Imperial Beach, so it's okay.
And we've got Leah Hayes, of course, with project manager at SeaTrees. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. What a pleasure.
And no, it's a pleasure for you. And I appreciate the Aussie accent. You're not in Australia, you're in San Diego now. So, but the accent's beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you.
So you also have a film about turtles.
Yeah. So WILDCOAST is an international, I'm the executive director and co-founder of WILDCOAST, and we conserve coastal and marine ecosystems and address climate change through natural solutions, and are a proud partner of SeaTrees. So working together to actually save the planet. And we have a film about that project, but we have another film about that we're entering in the Blue Water Film Festival. It'll be this Friday at the Paloma Theatre. It's about sea turtle arribada, these massive arrivals of olive ridley sea turtles in Oaxaca, and about how a small group of people, including our team at WILDCOAST, really worked to bring back those turtles from their extinction. So it's a fantastic film, and it's a fantastic film festival. So really stoked about that.
Well, I'm very excited because we will be attending. Larry Del Rosa is sitting across the table from me. We'll be attending that Thursday night. And we're excited. There's so much stuff about the ocean that's important, including the sea life. And I think I appreciate growing up in San Diego. I mean, we've been around water our whole lives. There's a concern about the sea life and, of course, the ocean. And you've always been a big advocate, I know for a fact, of what's going on. Let's hear more about what your movie's about.
Yeah. So, well, why don't we cue the trailer for the Sea Turtle Arribada? And it's made by thanks to a partnership with GoPro and a filmmaker, Jordan Miller. GoPro, a proud San Diego company, and founded by a UCSD graduate. As an alum of UCSD, very proud to share that distinction with the founder of GoPro. But they've been very supportive of WILDCOAST and really got behind, called GoPro for a Cause, and came down and just did a really You Are There film about this community-based experience of people who took leadership to save sea turtles and really made a difference. And I think it's a great template for how we go about, and WILDCOAST and SeaTrees even work together, right? Working with people from the ground up to save and restore the planet. So let's show the,
Podemos observar el desove de una tortuga golfina. Las tortugas golfinas llegan a desovar alrededor entre 80 y 120 huevos. Sobrevive solamente una de cada 1000. De aquí nacerá una guerrera que llegará al mar. Y cuando sea adulta, vendrá a desovar en la misma playa.
WILDCOAST is an international conservation team that works to preserve coastal and marine ecosystems.
Trabajamos con tortugas marinas, arrecifes de coral y manglares.
Sumando esfuerzos podemos conservar a estas especies que se encuentran en peligro de extinción.
So we were really stoked to have the support of GoPro. They've been very generous sponsors of WILDCOAST, but really also to promote that film that went viral. But we've been showing it at film festivals across the country, and it's done very well. It won the Grand Jury Prize at the San Diego first ever Environmental Film Festival. But we had it in New York, in Colorado, and now here at the Blue Water Film Festival, which is awesome as well. So, and I think that is what sort of defines the kind of work that SeaTrees does and WILDCOAST does. And it's really not being pessimistic. It's understanding that, you know, it takes people to save nature for people, right? And for the planet and for nature of itself. And that by doing these small scale projects from the ground up, whether it's restoring coral reefs or bringing back sea turtles or saving mangroves, that the film Aloha Adalto talks about, our partnership with SeaTrees, that's how you create the spark for change, right? That's just, you know, we can put our head in our sand and get really stressed out and really bummed out, but we have to have these hope places, these people who are hopeful, who can work together to do things on the ground and where you can show real impact.
You're always inspired. You never give up. With all the challenges that I've ever seen going on, you always keep forging ahead. Why is that, and how do you do that?
Well, you know, I grew up in an immigrant family. My parents came to this country. My dad escaped the Nazis' occupation of Europe. Many of his family members were sent to concentration camps. My mom was bombed by the Germans in World War II in London. So my parents just had this attitude of, like, you came to America and it's like, just keep moving forward. They didn't know what the rules were. The only rules were you broke all the rules to survive and get ahead. And I'm deeply grateful to my parents for that sort of it was a constant kick in the butt. We didn't have any money. And so, you know, they taught me that you don't give up, because, you know, there is no other option except to run forward. And I think that's the attitude of any successful environmental initiative. And what I like about being with the team from SeaTrees, for example, and our partners in Baja, these are incredibly optimistic, positive, inspiring people. Like, I get fired up when I'm in the field with our team and our partners doing these cool things, because, you know, in the case of Oaxaca, these are places in the middle of nowhere. Luis, who was on the beach talking about saving sea turtles, lived in a tent for 6 years.
Wow.
To save sea turtles. Like, that's his life, right? Like, it's super cool to see that. And that's what I think is important for everyone, regardless of whatever endeavor. We can't not move forward. And today, I think it's the anniversary of D-Day.
Yeah,
right.
Right.
You know, what a remarkable, grateful, because they liberated France, where my dad's family was. And you hear the stories of these soldiers who just landed on this beach against incredible odds, right? Thank God for our American military and our allied forces who didn't give up. Churchill, who didn't give up. And so I actually get inspired by things like that. And I think it's important for everyone to understand that we have no option but to move forward together.
I agree. Churchill was not doing very well in ratings in England at the time and rose to the occasion.
Well, you know what? And he was an innovator. He did things that nobody thought were possible. And you think about the liberation of Dunkirk and rescuing all those Allied and British forces on the beaches of Dunkirk, of which my uncle's brother was on that beach. And I think about determination. I think that's what it's about. It's about determination, right? Understanding that against incredible odds, humans have always superseded that. And right now, with climate change and the environmental crisis, we have no other choice but to work together to make a difference. And I think in Oaxaca, we see in the film that it is really possible.
Well, I'm always inspired by you and what you have to say, and I always learn from you, and you keep us up to date on stuff. So we've got these amazing films, and it seems like how impactful. I mean, more people are becoming aware because of the storytelling that you both are involved with, and I think that's a vital part. Plus the beautiful video that's involved with the storytelling, it just enhances the story even more. So tell us a little bit about Ms. Hayes, a little bit about you, and how you ended up in San Diego.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much. So yeah, my name is Leah. I am the program manager for SeaTrees at an organization called Sustainable Surf. So one of our core missions has actually been to explore how we can inspire the surfing community to be ocean stewards. We first started off with our Eco Board project, which is an incredible program that certifies surfboards and the different materials used in the manufacturing process to be eco-friendly. And we're not just working with small scale brands here. We're working with some of the biggest surfboard factories and manufacturers in the world. And the boards
how's that coming along?
Really?
I mean, it's probably an easier sell to surfboard manufacturers because they understand the importance of the environment and the ocean, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's what you would think, but that didn't always exist. So we're finding now that this is a growing trend, and that's what we want it to be. And it makes so much sense that surfers who are on the ocean every day, whose mental health very much depends on the surf, would be front and center in the protection of the ocean. So the traction that we're getting now from the surfing community is massive. And that's why we've seen these large-scale surfboard brands jump on board and get their board certified. So that's one component of what sustainable surf does. And then the other, flagship program, I guess you could say, is SeaTrees, which is a program that I'm so grateful to be working with. And what we do is we restore blue carbon coastal ecosystems all over the world in 5 different ecosystems. We work with kelp, seagrass, coastal watersheds, coral, and mangroves, which is what this film Aloha El Datil is about, is the restoration of mangroves in Baja, Mexico. And we work with these fantastic partner groups all over the world who are the boots on the ground or the fins in the water. SeaTrees ourselves, we aren't the ones out in the ground doing the work. We're there to help empower the groups do that through funding and through telling their story and ensuring that they can get even more funding by sharing their story. But it's groups like WILDCOAST who are the ones who are actually out in the ground, getting dirty and getting the work done.
So tell us about how you got involved with the film.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Serge and the crew at WILDCOAST have been working with the women down in San Ignacio for a long time. It's a beautiful and critical grey whale habitat. And a big component of what SeaTrees does is tell stories. So we've been telling stories as humans since the dawn of time. It's how we inspire change. Around the topic of climate change, it's so common for people to feel disempowered and often feel helpless and what they can do to sort of change the trajectory of where we're going. But when we can talk about these positive projects and initiatives and inspire people through these grassroots actions, we're more likely to see change. And we're more likely to have people with smiles on their faces feeling good about the little things we're able to do to help. So part of our partnership with WILDCOAST is to help share their story. And that's how we got involved with the film.
And of course, you surf yourself.
I do surf myself. Yeah. So you did ask me what's my story about being here. So a little bit similar to Serge in that I guess you could say I'm an immigrant in some ways. I actually came across to America because I won a green card in the diversity visa lottery. So it was pretty much like winning a green card out of a cereal box. I got very lucky. And I made the shift over here 5 years ago after working in marine conservation in Australia. And so I settled down in San Diego because it felt very similar to me in terms of the surfing community and the open-mindedness of the North County area of San Diego. And here I am.
Well, I'll tell you, I don't believe in, I believe in destino.
Destino.
I think it's important. I don't think you're here by an accident or coincidence. I think there's a good reason why you're probably here and why we're having this discussion right now.
I think so. I agree that there's always a reason for everything. And I definitely feel very fortunate in that I've been lucky enough to work on the East Coast of Australia, in the South Pacific, and now here on the West Coast of the USA as well. And so for me, and it's actually quite aligned with, the Indigenous Australian philosophy and how whales actually migrate across the ocean, is this connectedness, this bigger feeling that all of the coasts that line the Pacific Ocean, are connected by the Pacific Ocean. So we're all stewards of the sea. We all have responsibility through our own culture to protect it. And one of the beautiful things, and we'll show the film trailer in just a moment, but one of the beautiful stories that's woven into Aloha El Datil is this connection between the women and the land. And so it tells a story of a young Native Hawaiian woman from Kauai who is a surfer and who is also an engineer, who travels across to Mexico with the spirit of Aloha Aina, which is this idea that what we give to the land gives back to us. When we give it our breath, it will give us its breath. And so when we start talking about this, we're weaving in components of deep ecology. And the deep ecology philosophy talks about the earth being not just this random floating rock, floating around in space, but actually a living, breathing organism that we're contributing to. And so when we start melding in these beautiful components of spirituality and bringing in the nurturing aspect of women to the land, we start building the story that's so much more than just planting in the ground and playing around in soil, but actually giving back to this life source that gives so much to us.
I mean, I'm enjoying this. This is a great podcast because I think this is what podcast is about. It's about educating, but it's also it's just such it's a feel good solution of what we're trying to do with the ocean. And I think it's just the perfect time for what you're doing.
Yeah, and Leah, maybe you talk a little bit about blue carbon. I think you threw that out there, and assuming that most people know what blue carbon or green carbon or brown carbon is, but talk to us a little bit about that, because that is fundamental to what we're talking about with the Aloha Adoptil and the partnership with SeaTrees.
That's right. Yeah. So blue carbon coastal ecosystems, when we're talking about blue carbon, we're specifically talking about trees that sequester or fix carbon from the atmosphere into the oceanic soil, I guess you could say. So we're specifically talking about oceanic species. Mangroves are often termed sea trees because they are literally trees that grow in salt water. We obviously refer to sea trees as things like kelp and seagrass as well, which also have carbon fixation potential. So what we're trying to do, the whole idea of fixing carbon, is drawing it out of the atmosphere, which is then going to reduce that greenhouse effect, and the warming of the atmosphere. So yeah, essentially with blue carbon, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to fix this carbon, remove it out of the atmosphere and put it back into the ground, into the soils. And we do that by planting more of these trees. So it actually turns out that mangroves do this more effectively, about 10 times more effective at drawing carbon out of the atmosphere than tropical rainforest species like that of the Amazon.
It's amazing.
In Baja California, where we're working, what scientists from Scripps Institution of Oceanography and Griffith University in Australia and Queensland University in Australia, Catherine Lovelock, who's like the global guru on blue carbon ecosystems, found that was some of the most, even these tropical but desert mangroves in Baja California, because unlike what you would see in like Indonesia or Florida, for example, these are systems that are surrounded by desert and even sand dunes. So it's not raining a lot. So they're desert mangroves, and it turns out they draw even more carbon from the atmosphere into the soil or the mud than other types of mangroves. So it's a really remarkable thing. And when I started doing PhD work in Baja California 25 years ago, in San Ignacio Lagoon, or Laguna San Ignacio, where this film takes place, Aloha Adoptil, we didn't know that about mangroves. No one knew that. They knew they were great places to fish, to catch snook. So hand lining for snook, fishermen will appreciate that. And where you could see gray whales, but no one knew the superpowers of capturing carbon from the atmosphere that these mangroves have. And now we're doing a race against time to conserve them, but also expand them. And that's what the film Aloha Adoptil does. And that includes a remarkable group of young women who are from, let me tell you how, like, this place is insane to get to. So all the guys with their overlanding rigs would appreciate this place, because anybody on their way to Scorpion Bay, which is one of the best surf spots in Baja, will drive by this area, and it's literally over 100 miles from the nearest paved road.
Have you surfed it?
I've surfed Scorpion Bay, and I have surfed the area near here, in fact, where they surf in the film. My wife and I lived there for months back in the 90s as penniless grad students studying gray whales. And but this place is so remote. It's on a mud flat in the middle of nowhere. And if you get off track, you're stuck. Like, there ain't any four-wheel drive that's going to get you out. And I've been stuck there.
How did you get out?
Well, I got a fisherman who told me I was an idiot, helped pull me out, but we had to dig out the wheels. So it's legit, real Baja. And this film and our SeaTrees crew and our visitor, our friend from Hawaii, really did what I call, there's Baja. It's like, there's Cabo Wabo. That's not real Baja. And then that's Cabo Wabo Baja. And then there's like core Baja, the Baja 1000 guys know, and fishermen and surfers know. Like, you're 3 hours off grid in the middle of the dirt, and this was in the mud, and that's what where this film takes place.
Totally got it exactly, the vision of everything you were talking about.
Yeah, well, we live there, and what I love about the fishermen that they're working with, and especially these folks, is there isn't, talk about moving forward. They don't have any option but to not get stuck. And if you get stuck, it's like, well, get unstuck, because they live in places with no running water. There's no electricity, except they generate with solar panels. They don't have bank accounts. They just generate whatever they get from fishing, right? And so, life is day to day. It is survival. And they do it with this optimism and hope and laughter and sharing and caring that is really remarkable. And so this young group of women and one family really got together to help work with us to grow mangroves. And it's a great story. I was with them in March in Laguna San Ignacio, and we took them whale watching, because the whales come to this lagoon. And we had a friendly whale by our boat the whales come out of the water, and we show that in the film for more than an hour, and the kids were freaking out. It was absolutely awesome. So yeah, you can tell I'm a big fan of the film, of SeaTrees, of this project, but also really all of us who work in these areas, whether it's in San Diego Lagoon, where we have wetlands, and in San Diego, and that draw carbon out of the atmosphere, or our kelp forests off of La Jolla, or even here off Coronado, or broadcasting from today. Those are all important ecosystems for managing our fisheries, for keeping our wildlife around, for all the guys that like to dive for lobster at night when the lobster season opens up and we allow diving right off Point Loma. And but also, more importantly, for our fight against climate change. And we have to do that by reducing our emissions, but at the same time do what we call natural climate solutions, protecting and restoring these ecosystems that help us address coastal flooding. They help us reduce our emissions or draw down emissions from the atmosphere, but also they help these communities defend against hurricanes and all kinds of things. So it's very cool to see this sort of global movement that is really happening in places like these little villages all over the world, including in San Ignacio Lagoon, where this Aloha Delta takes place, as well as in Oaxaca, where our film, The Sea Turtle Arribada, is as well.
And the food, I'm sure, is very good in Oaxaca.
Oh, wait, food in Oaxaca. And in Baja, look. I'm
sure it's very good.
I lived in Baja for 2 years doing gray whale research in these areas and fishing communities. And I didn't even eat food I didn't eat quote Mexican food when I came back, because like we ate fresh seafood every day. It was like, what do you want? You want lobster, or do you want halibut, or do you want snook? Like ceviche, do you want clams, scallops? Like it was insane. Yeah, it's amazing. You gotta come down. So
he lived in the Mediterranean in Mexico.
Right. Oh yeah, legit. Like really good. That's how the fishermen eat, right? Like
wow.
Yeah, really, really amazing.
Making me hungry.
Yeah, well, I get hungry. They know they have to feed me when I'm down there.
So is there a clip that we want to show?
Yes, let's show it.
My name is Maluhia Kinimaka, and I'm from the island of Kauai. I'm a professional surfer and engineer and a native Hawaiian.
I'm excited to be in Baja to meet the local women from the village of El Datil and learn how they practice malama aina to care for the land by restoring their native mangrove forest. And I hope we can share our stories that cross cultures, like voyaging canoes that cross oceans.
Like the canoe, our ocean planet is nothing more than a vessel floating amongst a vast ocean of stars. In order to ensure the sustainability and success of the planet, we as passengers need to consider how we are consuming resources and how we can replenish those resources in return.
Very nice.
Yeah, very good. And you really see that truck driving through the desert really highlights. That's used to be a Baja 1000 road. Actually, the Baja 1000 road was further up in the hills. But yes, it's really, really remote. And those women in the film are really amazing. And there's a professor at UCSD, David Victor, who's kind of like this grand theorist and sort of person that's working on how we address climate change globally. He goes to all the meetings, the big conferences, and what he said was the mistake that we made was at first is we got the presidents all lined up and signed a piece of paper and expected to save the planet. And that didn't work. We need those global treaties, but what we need are millions of people around the world. And what he talks about in a new paper, and I think it was in Foreign Affairs, that what's happening around the world is people are gathering together like this community, and they're solving problems from the ground up, and they're learning from each other, and they're innovating. And that's what's happening with the electric car market now, and the battery market, and solar panels, for example. And so that's how we're going to save the planet. That's how we're going to make a difference, is when people band together and share innovation and collectively sort of like scale up. And that's what's happening with SeaTrees and WILDCOAST and these projects around the world. And that's why Aloha Adalta is so important, as well as the story of Oaxaca, because it really does show that we can make a difference.
Well, I mean, there's definitely more passion, it seems like, towards the ocean, maybe because of the awareness that we're finding out through the internet, people like yourself bringing that information to the masses.
Yeah, well, and also because we can touch and feel the ocean. So,
Right.
I think it is important to have, I think SeaTrees and Sustainable Surf have done a great job of getting, great surfers and people in the surf community to be engaged with this message, because I think that inspires others. And, the guy that I started WILDCOAST with, Wallace J. Nichols, wrote a book called Blue Mind, and he really talks about how contact with water really activates our well-being, right? That we need that contact. That since the dawn of time, humans have needed water. And I think that's something why it's so important to be in the ocean and to conserve the ocean, but more importantly, encourage people to use the ocean, right? To be with the ocean. And that's why I love being at the beach. I just saw you at the beach. It was empty because the water was polluted, but, and that killed me, because how many families were missing from the beach having a great day by having that interaction with the ocean, with each other, where it basically just produces joy and happiness.
I agree. And then now, when we were there at the beach that day in Coronado, I heard a family walk by, and they were really disappointed because last year they came on vacation around the same time, and this time they came again, and both times the beaches were closed.
Right. And I think that just shows what's at stake. And, we think, oh, this can't happen here. It can't happen in Coronado. It can't happen in San Diego, but it's happening around the world. And, whether we have all kinds of plastic in the ocean or oil spills, we know what the stakes are. And by doing these projects to restore these ecosystems and really clean up the ocean and restore the ocean, that's part of the effort to take back the earth, right? And save the earth in a real positive, constructive way that everyone can get involved in. It's not ideological. It's not political. It's not about an ism. It's just about getting stuff done and working together to do it.
Yeah. I would also add in there too, it's about inspiring people to take action in their own backyard or their own front yard, their own ocean front yard as well. When people visit places on vacation, they're usually having some sort of fun, emotional experience that connects them to that space. So naturally, they're going to care about wanting to protect it a little bit more. And I think that's one of the real beautiful things about the internet and social media and these free sharing platforms, is that people are getting out into nature more. And maybe it's just so that they can take a selfie, and that doesn't really feel super fulfilling. But the good thing is people are getting out and about, and they're experiencing these places. They're getting to feel, touch, and experience them with all of their senses. And so next time we see that they're under threat, they're likely to have more of an army of people that want to get together to protect it. And so now it's really the responsibility of groups like SeaTrees, like WILDCOAST, and all of the nonprofit groups around to have this call to action for people to get involved in. How can we get these people who might not be environmentally minded to actually want to do something or change their daily behavior to help protect the lands that they love? And that extends beyond the ocean as well. We're really lucky here on the coast in San Diego because the ocean is such a big part of our lifestyle and what we love to do. It's so intertwined. But, we've got mountain people as well. I've got desert people. And so I always like to say to people, what's your habitat? What is your favorite habitat? Where do you feel most yourself? Now go find an organization who's doing something really powerful in that area. Sign up to their newsletter, donate a little bit, and get out there and volunteer with them. Make that your one mission that you do, your one give back to the earth. Because there's always going to be a group to join, whether you're an ocean person, a mountain person, a desert person, however you identify, there is a piece of earth waiting for your help.
San Diego has always been like one big playground with all those varieties of things not too far apart from each other.
That's right. So much variety here.
And that's for many of us. And I think a lot of people in San Diego, they may have multiple ecosystems or, areas that they really are affinity to, because you can surf in the morning, go up to the mountains, go cross-country skiing if there's snow, or snowshoeing, and then get out and go out in the desert as well, just in the same day, which is pretty remarkable.
I think that's one of the reasons we've never really been a sports town, because we have natural things at our disposal here in San Diego that people would rather be doing surfing. People would rather be in the mountains. People would rather be doing something physically active. I mean, not to say that those sports things are not important, but I think that's one of the reasons. I mean, we just have the best overall climate too.
Yeah, well, and as climate change happens, San Diego's getting better and better. And, you know, I think that's highlighted today by what's happening on the East Coast and Northeast Canada, where you've got these forests burning and the wildfire smoke is now impacting New York City and Vermont and the Northeast. It's just highlights how connected we are. And the same thing happens. We have wildfires on the West Coast, and then they migrate out east over the West. So yeah, we are really all connected. And that's why I think it is important to give people options for things they can actually do. Some, you know, and I think that's what's great about these restoration projects and cleanup projects is that people can get their hands dirty and see that they can make a difference, right? It doesn't become hopeless. And I think in these times when people like to yell at each other and you know, argue and engage in conflict, or at least some people do, I really like things that bring people together. It's really, as a recovering politician or elected official, small town mayor, never saw the best and worst of people. I really, really love things that bring people together. And I love being on the beach in Coronado at a protest just last week over pollution. But it was really nice because people were just gathering, people I hadn't seen in years, and people came out of the woodwork just to support the ocean. I thought that was really, really nice. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something about these projects is that people can get behind them because they can get dirty and make a difference.
Well, we definitely need a way to find a way to work together because there's been so much dismay. You know, we may disagree on 5% of something,
right?
Instead of saying, well, you know, we agree on the environment, we agree on the same type of music. You know, politically we might be different, but who cares? Let's focus on what we have in common because we can get more done that way.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's really important. You know, Leah, you know, something that I spent a sabbatical in the East Coast of Australia in the summer of 2009. So your winter in 2009, yes. Going from Sydney down to the Great Ocean Road. My kids were 11 and 13, and you know, surrounded by the amazing gum forests of southeastern Australia. Absolutely amazing, and these ecosystems that's so rich and vibrant. Mm-hmm. And I think we were right on the in a national park, Ben Boyd National Park, right on the border with Victoria and New South Wales. And talk about wild areas and amazing fishermen and ranchers and feral, you know, people living out in the bush and surfers. It was a remarkable trip. But what I kept saying was, thank God there's not a forest fire. And now I think what the world's been waking up to is, and I think this is really poignant. There's an image of the remnants of a wildfire, the great wildfires that happened in that part of the world a few years ago. Yes. And there's a kookaburra just standing in an empty forest. And maybe talk about that a little bit. Has that had an impact? I mean, I'm assuming your friends and family have been you've been over here, but how has that affected you and your desire to sort of make this kind of difference? Because it does seem relevant that you're working on doing projects that restore the earth, because where you're from, there's been so much loss and devastation.
Thanks, Serge. I actually just got shivers when you asked me that question. Yes, so back in 2000 and what year are we? 2019, I believe it was. I was actually living out in Hawaii on Maui at this stage. And those horrendous bushfires did break out in Australia, and they actually were very close to where I was from. So I've lived most of my adult life in a beautiful area that a lot of people actually do know about these days. It's pretty on the map. It's called Byron Bay.
Of course, yeah,
amazing spot. That's where I went to university, was just inland from there, and a wonderful university for anyone studying environmental and marine science. So I was very lucky. And the fires actually reached up that far, and that area holds some of the last remnant Gondwana forest. So that's some of the most ancient, rainforest in the world, which has been mostly decimated by British settlers who knocked it all down for cattle farming, which is what's happened across most of Australia. But that particular area had this last really special remnant, and a lot of that got burned in this fire. And what was crazy about that is that sort of rich, moist rainforest doesn't usually get affected by dry bushfires, right? It's usually that dry eucalyptus forest, which actually by its very nature is flammable. It's designed to be ignition for a fire, because a lot of the seeds of the eucalyptus trees require bushfires in order to crack open and then regenerate. However, rainforest lighting on fire is, something else. And these fires burn so hot that koalas, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, koalas actually have an adaptation mechanism for bushfires where they go to the very tops of the eucalyptus trees because fire usually burns underneath. But these fires were so hot that they reached so high up into the canopy that we lost a significant chunk of our koala population. And there's some devastating photos of that. It was so intense to be witnessing that in Northern Rivers and to have friends' homes that were burning down that I actually left Hawaii and went back to Australia during this time for that reason to help. And then COVID actually started just 1 or 2 months later. So Australia, the east coast of Australia, went from dealing with these devastating fires all of a sudden into COVID. And so sadly, a lot of the money that was raised for the fires ended up going into COVID relief. And so the environment really took a heavy hit there. And in more recent times, just as we've moved through COVID, that same area has now been hit with absolute catastrophe of floods. So it's gone from one extreme to the other. So the east coast of Australia has really seen the impacts of climate change. It's a very real thing. And that's put huge pressures on the Australian government to actually act on this, because similar to America, it's a two-party political system for the most part. And there's often a lot of issues with that when the environment gets involved. So that's why, I'll be honest with you, that's why I actually moved across to doing something like solutions-based initiatives. I actually used to work more specifically in advocacy. So a less official name for that is activism. I was working a lot more in government, in policy, trying to get rid of shark nets, reduce plastics in the ocean, get marine parks put through Parliament. A lot of protection and a lot of banging my head up against the brick wall, so to speak. And I realized at one point that this is actually killing my soul a little bit. You can do countless numbers of volunteers, can put in endless amounts of hours to do really great things for the planet. But then the government can change. And all of a sudden, everything you've just been working on for the last 5 years under, say, a Liberal government to protect, the forests gets wiped out in the name of the fossil fuel industry, which is what we saw a lot. So I actually took a big time out after that and realized I had to reassess, how can I be more effective as an environmentalist? And I realized that we have to go past the governments. We actually have to go get the work done, create the solutions, and just hope that they follow us once they see that it's successful. And so as soon as I got clear on what I wanted to do, which was to focus on marine habitat protection and rejuvenation, that's when SeaTrees came into my field, and it was just the most seamless process ever. And it's felt so much better because now my energy isn't hitting up against a brick wall with the government, and now it's this free-flowing thing where we get to create change all over the planet. And what's nice is that the governments are waking up now, the corporations are waking up, and they're seeing that this is a trend. They're seeing that people want to be involved in this. They're seeing that it can make them money. And so that's how we're creating change, is we're going beyond the status quo, beyond the normal. We're branching out, we're getting brands involved, we're getting corporations involved who once were the issue, who now want to be part of the solution. And so that's how I ended up where I am.
So it sounds like she's become like water.
Well, yeah,
I'm around things, right?
I'm really glad I asked that question, because I think it really opened up sort of like, the sort of ethos of why you're doing this work, but also the importance of this sort of on the ground rejuvenation. And, but, I know SeaTrees is really involved in supporting coral reef restoration. And then just north of where you're from and up in Canberra, is it Canberra, right? I think, or is it?
Up in Queensland, actually. So
Queensland, sorry. The Great Barrier Reef is, the largest coral reef in the world, and it's being, because of coral bleaching. Maybe talk a little bit about that and why that's so important, because of what's happening there. It's important to maintain and restore these reefs around the world. Sure.
Yeah. I love the subject of coral reefs. It's my favorite ecosystem, probably because it's my backyard. But first of all, I'd love to tell the audience what coral bleaching actually is. So it's when coral loses its color, essentially. But what's more interesting is what's happening is when the ocean heats up by just 1 degree Celsius, by just 1 degree, the microalgae, so you imagine like these little beings that live inside the coral, go, oh my God, it's getting too hot in here. We need to leave this piece of coral right now. And they vacate the coral. Now, those little algae, they're called zooxanthellae. They have this big, long name. They are actually what gives the coral the color. So when the water gets too hot and they get too hot, they're like, we need some space. They vacate the coral turns white, and then they get susceptible to predators out in the water column. So that's actually what's happening with coral bleaching. It's crazy. So it is sad. We've seen a huge percentage of the coral reef bleach. It's had 6 bleaching events now. And the reason that happens is because of warming sea temperatures. And now, why does the ocean warm up? Well, the ocean actually does this incredible job for us that we don't really know about. It's kind of like a thermostat that's in our car. When the atmosphere warms up, the ocean kindly takes that heat from us. Otherwise, we'd be burning, probably melting out here on Earth, but the ocean provides that beautiful role for us. And unfortunately, things like coral end up suffering as a result of that.
How much impact does the ocean have on the climate? I mean, we talk about climate change, but does the ocean affect the weather? Can it affect the weather?
Oh, absolutely. And Serge might be able to talk to this better than myself, having studied so much down there in the marine ecosystem local to this part of the world. But absolutely, it's also connected. And I always say that if every politician had to redo high school level ecology, we would be living in a completely different world. Just to remind ourselves how interconnected all of these systems are, from, the moon cycles is a great example of how the moon affects the tide. So yeah, there's countless, especially like another one example is El Nino. We're about to go into another El Nino event later this year. And it's a little bit scary in regards to things like our kelp population, for example. So San Diego experienced a mass disappearance of our giant kelp forest back in 2014 to about 2016, when the waters warmed up as a result of the El Nino. Now, usually when the water temperature goes back to normal, we'll see those natural kelp populations just repopulate on their own. But for some reason, this time around in San Diego, they didn't return. And we don't know why. And actually, one of our other projects at SeaTrees is working in partnerships with Scripps Institution of Oceanography to fund some research scientists to figure out why. Now, in other parts of California, we've seen kelp loss as well, but that's been because of urchins and urchin barrens. So big fields of these purple spiky urchins that just eat all of the kelp. But that's not actually the issue down in San Diego, in La Jolla. I think we've got some urchin barrens down further south where you guys are, but for the most part, from La Jolla all the way up to sort of Encinitas, there's no urchin barrens. So we don't know why the kelp hasn't come back. So that's one of the impacts.
No, it's a big deal. And right now the El Nino is, the warming of the oceans. We're seeing, it's happening in the southern oceans right now. In fact, if I understand it, they're recording some of the highest ocean temperatures ever recorded in modern human history, and which is concerning. So the last time we had a La Nina, we came out of La Nina, though it was a little odd because we had these atmospheric rivers dumping huge amounts of snow in the Sierras. Thank God, to bring back snow and water to California in the West. But we're going to an El Nino, and I think the correlation between climate and then biodiversity loss or ecosystem loss. So, for example, my team this week has been all over the field and out in boats in Southern California, out to kelp forests in LA, or former kelp forests, out on the border, and then in the rainforests and mangroves of Chiapas and Oaxaca and southern Mexico, this very southern part of Mexico near the Guatemalan border, where you've had a lot of deforestation, right, up in the mountains, in the jungle, the rainforests, and the mountains, as well as a lot of loss of mangroves because of shrimp farming and other projects. And so what you've seen is the climate has changed, become a lot drier. They get less frequent rainfall. The rains come later. And then when they do come, and this happens in Australia after the forest fires, you get huge amounts of sediment or dirt that are in these rivers running down and filling in some of these wetlands. So, and so that's a big problem with all this habitat loss and forest fires. It does sort of like a negative feedback loop, right? It just creates exacerbating this problem. And I saw that, I was in Canada this year in British Columbia, where you've had a lot of huge impact from forest fires and climate change. These extreme temperatures, a town basically caught fire and burned down. And I was just dismayed to see how much deforestation and forest fires had happened and how warm it was. So really, really interesting to see this happening. And more importantly, why it's important to double down on reforestation, planting mangroves, protecting our coral reefs, and in San Diego, our salt marshes, seagrasses that you find in the shoreline, along the shoreline, or in the surf zone and in wetlands, as well as our coastal salt marshes, that all help to sequester carbon and help us deal with things like sea level rise.
Well, it's a lot to comprehend for a layman like myself, but it's been educational, and I'm concerned because I don't want to see San Diego. I mean, the San Diego we remember. I don't want to see that. I mean, it's already disappeared a lot. But the fact that there's education and there's these wonderful films that are out, plus the foundations. which you've been very active in, but and of course you are also. We have that information at the very bottom of the screen, correct? For both foundations. Is there any other films?
Well, yeah, talking about being in the field, we have a little short clip about WILDCOAST, and I get really excited when I see the photos of my staff out in the rainforest and mangroves of Chiapas and Oaxaca and out in boats. But yeah, nice clip about WILDCOAST. And just before I say that, talking about seafood in Baja, we have our annual fundraiser, the Baja Bash, on June 17th. You can find out about that and buy tickets at wildcoast.org. It'll be in North County in Solana Beach, overlooking Cardiff Lagoon and Cardiff Reef. And so really excited about that with some of Southern California's greatest chefs. We got seafood coming up from Baja. Somebody's going to be shucking clams from San Quintin, so that's exciting. So it'll be a great time, and we're calling it North County's best party. So anyway, look forward to seeing people there. But yeah, we got a nice clip about some of the work we're doing at WILDCOAST all over the Pacific, from the Guatemalan border all the way up to the Oregon border. It's the most perfect thing, right? It's a thing that makes the most sense because nature in and of itself is perfect. And all we're trying to do is preserve perfection and then work with really inspiring and motivated people to do that. So I'm Serge Dedina, the Executive Director and co-founder of WILDCOAST Costa Salvaje. We're an international conservation team that works to preserve coastal and marine ecosystems and address climate change through natural solutions. We're interested in saving places from the ground up. Globally important places, whether they're wetlands or mangrove forests or sea turtle nesting beaches for their coral reefs that exist nowhere else on the earth. Places that help sequester carbon and mitigate climate change and adapt to it, that are wildlife havens, and that are filled with people that want to save those places for not only themselves and their communities, but for the entire planet. These are amazing places that we have to help protect these. We have to make sure that these places are around for generations to come. WILDCOAST really has one mission now, and I think a lot of us around the world, not to help save the planet. That's to help address this climate crisis that we're facing, and to really strategically, we're in a race, and that's a race to save nature. Wilderness, we can, there are white sharks right off Coronado.
Yeah, I heard about it. We have a lot of great white sharks.
We do have a lot of great white sharks in Del Mar and Coronado. In fact, they're finding that these juveniles are offshore, and we've got blue whales right now cruising the California coast about 30 miles off. We just had the gray whale migration. Pacific white-sided dolphins that are in that film were filmed off of San Diego, where you can see hundreds in these sort of mega groups, mega pods. So, and you can go to a wetland and see nature, and, all the osprey at the Silver Strand State Beach. It's amazing, just south of where we're at in Southern Coronado. It's amazing to see just how much wildlife can come back when you give it a chance and you keep wildlife safe and when you restore these ecosystems. And I think that image of the kookaburra in Australia really it has had a huge impact. I mean, I'm thinking the koalas, the poor koalas climbing the top, because the reality of nature's fine without us if we leave it alone, but we're not. And so we need to help figure out how to bring it back and restore it. And I think we're really good about that. And that's something you said, Brett. San Diego in some ways is better than it was in the 70s in terms of some of these ecosystems. We've done a lot to restore wetlands. In fact, probably San Diego County has some of the best, the geniuses and best practitioners of wetland restoration, coastal salt marsh restoration in the world. And they've done that at San Diego Lagoon, South San Diego Bay. Ironically, the Tijuana estuary now is filling up with sewage and sediment. Bataquitos Lagoon. So got a great group of people. We know how to do this. It's not that complicated. And so we just need to export it and fund it and get the public behind it, which is why I love working with SeaTrees. And I know our team at WILDCOAST is so excited to be in the mud and in the dirt and the water.
Well, you can look forward to us supporting both of you a lot more now that we know a little bit more about you and the storytelling's getting out there more and more. I would love to have more of these situations where you both come in or periodically come in to let us know what's going on. And I think it's important that we get more messages out there and to let people know what's going on and keep them aware. I feel like I've been back in college.
Great. We love that. It's always a good feeling to feel like we're learning something new, especially when it's just in our own backyard. And on that topic, actually, Serge and I will both be speaking at a film panel as part of this film festival on Friday at 4 p.m. It's actually a slightly overlapping time with one of the films, but I often get a lot of parents say to me, my kid wants to be a marine biologist, or my child wants to become, to protect the environment. What's their pathway to doing that? And I always tell them, what I did was I just volunteered. I got as much experience as I could volunteering with organizations, learning the ropes. Anyone can go to university and read a book, but it's more about the experience that you get in the field. And so Serge and I will be talking on an impact panel along with representatives from NOAA and Scripps, and it will be the perfect opportunity for young folk who are in high school or thinking about going on to college to come along and sort of learn a little bit more about the pathways of making some big impact in the marine realm.
And that'll be at the Park and Market facility downtown, the UCSD facility downtown. I guess it's a Park and Market and their theater there at 4 p.m. on Friday. Thanks for bringing that up. I forgot about that.
The Guggenheim Theatre. It sounds quite fancy, so that's
it sounds very fancy. Hopefully, everybody's wearing flip-flops.
Yes. Yeah, I always wear. Don't worry, we'll be wearing our flip-flops.
There you go. I was just remembering. Have either one of you done a children's book?
Have we written a children's book? I haven't.
On the ocean.
No, I have not.
I think that would be a fabulous for either one of you to do a children. I've done 2 children's books myself, but I think something with the ocean. I remember a book when I was a kid called Paju. Remember that book?
Mm-mm.
It was about a hermit crab.
Oh, okay.
And it left a huge. I mean, I'm still thinking about it, and it kind of was way ahead of its time. Do you remember that book? Remember that book either? I remember that book because it made you kind of feel like everyday life of what it was to be a hermit crab. It was Paju, I think was what it was. I got to double check and find out where that book is, but I could see one of you doing something like that, something about the ocean, something in it. It's very, very artsy and beautiful, and then telling a story in a simplistic way like you did today. But you took that's the sign of excellence. Taking a subject that is so widespread with so much information, and yet you were able to talk about it in a simplistic way and get your message across. And I appreciate both of you for being able to do that.
Well, frankly, I was mesmerized, Leah, by your discussion of corals. It was really well done. I was really impressed.
Yeah, no, I mean, it totally
I think we were both like, oh, holy, what? Like,
right.
Wow, legit. Like you know your stuff. So, and you talked about it in a really compelling way. And I still have the image of the koalas climbing in the top of the trees. But I may not sleep tonight thinking about that. I'll be so upset. But thank you for sharing that.
No worries. Thank you. And that really does just prove the power of story and how when we bring it back down to basics and create that imagery, we can talk across cultures, ages, all sorts of knowledge levels to be able to get the message across. So yeah, thank you so much for having us on here, Brett, to be able to even talk about this topic. It's really heartwarming.
It's a very important subject, and we need to get more support, and we need to get behind it a lot more.
Well, I want to thank you because, you came when I was the mayor of Imperial Beach, California. Brett came to my office and we talked about this huge problem, the Tijuana River and ocean pollution. And you really care. Like, that's what the thing is. You really care about it and you're really passionate about it. And, in a real popular way. And I think it's really important for everybody in the community to feel like they're part of the solution. That's what I really felt when I talked to you. And so I want to thank you for that.
I appreciate you in a very challenged time during COVID, accepting me into your office and taking time. I mean, we only wanted 20 minutes.
Like one of the first people I had back in the office after we got vaccinated and stuff, right? Yeah.
And I went in there and he gave us more than, I think we were there like 90 minutes. We were only supposed to be there 20 minutes. So I saw his passion right off the bat. And I'm just honored to be involved working with you too on this, because I'm going to help as much as I can from my end to get the message out. And we have a magazine as well.
Oh, great.
So I'd like to get some articles in that magazine. It goes out quarterly, and I think it's important to get that message out.
Great. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Was there a question? Oh, the event. About the film?
Yeah, so we have Aloha El Delta is playing at June 9th at 5 p.m. at the La Paloma Theatre. And then we have the Sea Turtle Arribada is playing June 9th at 7:30 p.m. at the La Paloma Theatre in Encinitas. And then we're having our 4 p.m. impact panel at the Park and Market UCSD forum event space downtown this Friday.
There you go.
And
Okay,
all
let's
that
support 'em.
information can be found on the Blue Water Film Festival Instagram page. They've got all of that information there in case all of that sounds a bit confusing, and then on their website as well.
I thank you both for being here again, and thank you so much for your passion and your drive to keep this thing going, because it's important. And which support their films, and which support, of course, everything it has to do with the ocean, not just in San Diego, but worldwide. And I know our audience is worldwide. So please, let's think about the ocean, and let's follow these two. Their information's there at the bottom. And I want to thank my sponsors, because without them, we wouldn't have be able to turn the lights on or pay our rent. So thank you to all those sponsors. We know what they are when we put their information up there as well. I thank all of you for being here. Everybody take care. Have a nice evening, and remember, be nice to each other.